Hi there guys, this is the Average Joe, and today I wanted to talk to you about a few things this COVID pandemic will change forever in the way we see things, and actually a few things that will be changed forever around the world um, because of this COVID pandemic. Before I start, I'd like you to subscribe to my channel and hit that little bell button if you want to receive notifications. Okay? Let's start. Well guys, before we start, actually, how do we know this COVID pandemic will change things around the world and in the big scheme of things? Well, some of the things in the most recent history we can look at and compare it with this COVID crisis are probably the fall of the Berlin Wall or the collapse of Lehman Brothers. Just like the fall of the Berlin Wall or the collapse of the Lehman Brothers, this COVID pandemic is actually affecting everybody around the world. So that is why I'm making a comparison with these two pretty near in the near history events. It's a we can actually say that this pandemic is a world-shattering event, and the consequences are pretty far-ranging, and we can only imagine what they will be. So, first of all, how will the world be after the COVID pandemic ends? Well, we can be pretty sure we'll see a world where freedoms and the openness of the world is restrained. We are pretty sure we will see a world with less freedom and more closed in, with probably less prosperity, and the growth will be affected. The economic growth of the world. There are a few things to consider, but we can look and see that there will probably be not a power shift between East and West, but if we go and see that the states in the eastern area, like in the far eastern area, China, South Korea, Singapore, they have responded best to this pandemic, while the states in the West, like Italy, France, Spain, did not respond as well. Well, we have to take in consideration that the states in the Eastern Hemisphere are states with less freedoms. I mean, China is a communist country. In Singapore and South Korea, even if they are democracies, people are more restricted, let's say. People's freedom are a little bit more restricted. While in the West, where everybody does what they want, we see that the pandemic has exploded, and we now see military on the streets. We see basic rights being diminished, and that will give a opportunity for the political parties for the political factors actually to continue with a diminished freedom after the pandemic is over, and with more control over the population. We also have to consider that not even in the influenza between 1918 and 1919, um, the political, the fundamental, the fundamental nature of the political world didn't change. Um, well, the great powers will continue to be rivals. We will not see a collaboration of any sorts between the big powers, probably. Not a collaboration of any sorts, but we will not see an earth-shattering change in the way that the big powers conduct business in rapport with one another. But we will probably see less freedom for the average people, and probably less prosperity because of the diminished freedom. Now, the second thing that will probably change forever is the way we see globalization. Um, what can I say? For the moment, we see Western powers, the Western civilization, I don't know how to say it, as being a big factor in globalization. But after this COVID pandemic, I believe that China will play an increasingly powerful role, and that we will see a rise in the globalization of China, of Chinese power. We will see more Chinese corporations. For now, we see Western companies conducting business in China with China as their labor force. After this pandemic, I believe we will see a decrease in the use of Western power, in the use of manpower in China by the Western companies, and actually a move towards Chinese companies globalizing and moving to the West, buying and having a more and more powerful position on the economic markets. I mean, we will continue to see a return to the idea of mutual benefits in the globalization, but it will not be defined the same way it was in the 21st century. One other thing that will affect this is the capability of the leaders to lead their people during these moments. If the political leaders show a capable way of controlling this pandemic in a country, that country will probably not lose its investors, will not lose money, and will probably be able to retain some power in the new globalization era. One other way we will see this COVID pandemic change the world as we know it is probably the way that companies conduct businesses. We all see that the global supply chains have been disturbed by this COVID pandemic. I mean, hospitals can't get masks. There are areas in the world where you cannot get disinfectants, or you can get them but for very expensive prices. So after this pandemic is over, I do not see how we will turn back to the globalized supply chain we had before, but we will probably see a, how should I put it, a diversification in production in most countries. Most countries will probably try to make most of what they need for their daily basis inside of the country, even if that means lower profits, but that will probably mean a more stable world where everybody can produce almost everything. Okay, not almost everything, I mean, you're not going to see spaceships made in, I don't know, some third country world, but okay, we're not talking about how this is going to affect the third world countries, but in the Western world, we're probably going to see these changes. I mean, we can see for the moment that factories closing in China affected the supply chain in Europe and in the United States. And after this pandemic, I believe that both governments and the corporate world will try to conduct businesses in a more stable way. Okay, maybe the corporate world will still try to bring the biggest profit, but I believe that manufacturing will come in many cases back in the country of origin of said corporation. That this way bringing more stability for that corporation, even if it comes at the cost of a lower profit, because if for a corporation, if you cannot deliver a product, it means bankruptcy. Delivering a product that is having a sustainable business at a lower profit still makes it a sustainable business. Okay, not with lower profit margins, but still a working business. So this is another way I see this COVID pandemic affecting the world we are living in. One other way this pandemic will probably change the world is by redistributing the power in the world. I guess we're going to have some pretty failed countries after this pandemic, meaning that there will be states that are in a pretty decent position economically at the moment, but which might have a very difficult recovery after this pandemic, and that might mean that the countries around them succeed in taking advantage of this weakness, and maybe we will see a redistribution of economic power and, okay, not military power, because this is not really affecting the military power, but we will probably see a redistribution of economical power, and at the end of the pandemic we will probably see some states coming out as winners and some states coming out as almost failed states with a very, very difficult recovery, and the states that might come out as losers in some cases might be states that in this moment are pretty powerful states that have a pretty powerful economy. So that's a thing to really keep in mind and see if this pandemic will redistribute wealth or redistribute power in the world. And the last thing I want to talk about is the way we are going to see the medical system from now on, and the first responders, and the changes that will come after this pandemic. I mean, uh, the social security politics will probably change in many countries. For example, most countries in Europe give a free medicine, let's say that. Emergency and medical services are free for everyone that is paying taxes. I know in the States you have to have an insurance. This pandemic will probably change the way we see things. In many countries we might not take the medical system for granted anymore, but in other states that live on a insurance-based system, there might be changes that will, I don't know, will make more people have access to medical services. And one other thing is that from now on there will be plenty more investments probably in the medical sector, not just for profit, but derived from a more social politic of the governments. The governments from now on will probably take care more of the medical system and of the first responders system, the ambulance, firemen, police, and so on. Now, will all these changes be for the good? Probably not. But there will be changes. I mean, I'm sure that the medical system will change after this pandemic. We can see states where the medical system is almost in collapse, and we see states that almost don't even bother treating their patients, their sick people, which will probably become unacceptable, and thus the medical system in many countries will probably change after this. Thank you for watching, guys. These were my thoughts on how this COVID pandemic will change the world. Thanks for watching. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of my videos, please subscribe and hit that little bell button notification so you can receive notifications when I post my next video. Thank you, guys, and see you next time.